Yo, what's up guys? It is Bumfris back with episode 32 of our Reddit series. This one's going to be some more entitled parents and I know you're going to love this one. It feels like just yesterday I was saying we were nearly at 10,000 subscribers, but we're nearly at 50,000 and it would be amazing if we could hit that today. So if you haven't already, don't forget to smash the subscribe button. Now all you need to do is sit back, relax and get mad at some entitled parents. So a few years ago, as a present for graduating from uni, my parents took me on a holiday to Tenerife. This was a pretty big deal for me. I have severe mental health problems including PTSD and agoraphobia, which makes traveling pretty much impossible. However, I'd been fairly stable in recovery for a while and thought this would be a great opportunity to challenge myself. As most of my triggers are sensory, I popped an eye mask and noise cancelling headphones in my hand luggage thinking that would help me get through the flight. Oh, how was I wrong? Everything was going surprisingly well up until we boarded the flight. In the row behind us was a mother and her two children, aged around 4 to 5 and 8, the younger of which was crying from boarding. I went to pop in my earphones and discovered they'd broken since arriving at the airport. My mum was nice enough to let me borrow hers, which unfortunately weren't noise cancelling, and while my anxiety was skyrocketing, things weren't unbearable. It sucked that my headphones broke, but hey, these things happen. About 10 minutes after takeoff, I felt a jolt in the back of my seat. The crying child had begun to boot the back of my seat as hard as her little legs could. Trying to control my breathing and twitching, I turned around and kindly informed the mum that her child was kicking my seat. She looked up from her tablet, smiled and nodded at me. I assumed she was going to deal with the situation and put my headphones back in. The kicking continues. I begin to get a nasty flashback, so my mum, who was aware of the situation, let the entitled mum know that her crying child was still kicking my seat and that I had major sensory issues that it was impacting. The entitled mum says there's nothing she can do and suggests that I swap seats with my mum, to the one in front of the entitled mum. At this point, the entitled mum hadn't behaved unreasonably. I know my disability is my problem and some random shouldn't have to accommodate it. So I swapped seats with my mum and focused on trying to stop panicking and dissociating. This is when entitled mum started acting like a colossal bellend. Around 5 minutes after I move, she puts her child on her lap and the child resumes kicking my seat. I swap back to my original seat and she puts the child back behind me. I swap with my dad, who had the seat in front of the older child, as that child had been placid all flight. My mum hears entitled mum whisper something to her older child and they immediately begin kicking my seat, substantially harder than the smaller child. Crying my eyes out, I return to my original seat and proceed to have continuous panic attacks and flashbacks over the next hour as my mum tries her best to help me through them. Eventually, the child begins shoving her hand through the gaps in the seat, grabbing near my neck, which is a major trigger, and I completely break down. My mum again asks the entitled mum to please try and control her children, and the entitled mum responds that her kids were just bored and could do whatever they want, including grabbing people. Who were we to tell her how to raise her kids? Knowing that making a scene would make things worse, my mum just turns around and just helps me get through the flight. Unfortunately, there's no happy epilogue to this story. The whole mess continued until arrival and we never seen them again. Thankfully, our return was a lot easier, but I haven't been on a flight since. While the entitled parent is nowhere near as crappy as some of the others on this sub, and I do have to take some of the blame in this story as I probably wasn't ready to fly, I thought the fact that she seemed to encourage her kids to behave like little wank stains made it appropriate for this sub. I also forgot to mention that mid-flight she ordered tuna melts for her and her brood, but thankfully nasty smells aren't a trigger for me, so she just mildly annoyed everyone around her. It was so petty, but my family got a good laugh out of it later. Well, that's a depressing way to start this episode. I actually didn't read this one in advance. I saw that it had a lot of upvotes, no one was calling it out as fake, and I just trusted that I could have a natural reaction to it at the end of the post. Unfortunately, my reaction to this one's probably quite similar to all of yours. This one just left me hella annoyed, and I don't think I ever want to read an entitled parent story again. I have a condition known as type 1 diabetes. I've had it since I was 1 and become pretty good at controlling it. I just got a new insulin pump because my previous one was old and it kind of looks like an iPhone. I was at a wedding party and I was minding my own business until I feel my pump being pulled on. I look down to see that a little kid, maybe 5 or 6, was pulling on it. I say to him, "What the? You can't have that. It's not a toy." And the kid runs off. I thought he was gone, but he just went to get his mum. The entitled mum says, "Would you please let my son have your phone?" At this, I realized that the kid thought my pump was a phone, and I started to explain, but then this happened. I said to the entitled mum, "I'm sorry, you can't have it, it's not," and then she cut me off saying, "You selfish teenager, you don't deserve to have a phone, give it to my son right now." I continue to try and explain that it's not a phone, and the entitled brat starts crying and screams, "I want it." He then starts frantically trying to pull it out, but I don't let him, and say, "Get your brat out of here before I call the police." I pull out my real phone as a warning and the entitled mum says, "You have 2 phones? Give him the other one." She grabs my pump and pulls it out of my skin. My stomach started to bleed at an alarming rate. I started to scream in pain as the entitled mum gives my pump to her kid. She then says, "It's just a phone, stop screaming." But then she noticed that my shirt was covered in blood and takes the insulin pump out of entitled brat's hands and gives it back to me, almost as if she hadn't pulled the pump out of my skin. She then says, "I'm sorry, I thought it was a phone." She grabbed her kid by the hand and ran out of the building quickly. I walked back into the party and told my mum, so she drove me home and put my pump back in. A few weeks later, I'd noticed that the spot the pump was on had gotten an infection, and I saw her at Walmart the next day. This all happened a few years ago and I'm fine. My dad alerted the police, but since we didn't know her, I can't remember what she looked like and I haven't seen her in years, we couldn't get her punished. Well, that's 2 from 2 that don't have a very good ending, so at this point I think I need to learn to read these before I commit to putting them in the video. But honestly, on a more serious note, I don't know what it is about entitled parents and thinking that they literally own other people's property, but it just gets to me so much. I don't ever want to have to imagine myself in a situation like this, but I can only imagine that if I was, it would definitely not go down as well as this. You better believe that if you're going to treat me or anyone I care about like this, you are absolutely going to get it back. This happened maybe a year after I graduated. My mum was headed to throw a little summer party with a few of her friends invited and a few of my sister's friends who were fairly younger than me. I just turned 19. I hadn't yet got a frame for my diploma, and since I was so proud of myself, I kept it displayed on my dresser alongside the few academic accolades that I had. During the party, people were going in and out of my room since that's where the coats were and a few of my sister's toys. I have the biggest closet out of anyone in the house, so that's where the stuff gets stored. I didn't really care that there were children running in and out of my room until I heard a commotion. It turns out that the entitled kid wanted to play with my diploma and my younger sister was trying to stop him. That was a big no-no. He hadn't taken the actual diploma out of its booklet, so it was still fairly safe. So I calmly say to the kid, "Hey, you can't play with that," while I try to grab it from his ravioli-sized fist, causing the kid to wail like a siren. His mum walks in and says, "What's going on?" And I say to her, "He's playing with my diploma." And she says, "So? It's just a piece of paper." So I'm getting frustrated, but whatever. I snatch it from him and put it up on the highest shelf. Me being a rational adult that knows no means no, I walk away and leave my room. I don't go back to check up on things until towards the end of the party when I'm retrieving coats for a few friends. When I enter, my heart absolutely sinks. Entitled kid has my diploma out of its booklet and the entitled mum is watching him flop it around like a toy. At this point, I can't try to grab it from him or else it'll rip it up for sure. So I ask the entitled mum why she's letting him play with my diploma when I put it away already. She just says, "I'm watching him and he hasn't done anything to it." I don't dignify her stupid excuse with a reaction and simply demand that she gives me back my diploma. Of course he refuses, and the entitled mum tells me that I should just let him play with it because he's not doing any harm. However, he already has, as it's already quite crinkled from him gripping it. I once again demand it back and in response get a level 5 tantrum. And of course, the first thing the little brat does is tear my diploma into Reese's pieces, and the entitled mum has the audacity to laugh. I don't scream at her, I simply go get my mother and demand that she have her house guests and her demon-spawned child leave. My mum comes into my room to see what the issue is and she's just as upset as I am. My mum, furious, says, "What the hell? How did this even happen?" And the entitled mum responds, "It wouldn't have happened if he just let my kid play with it. I was watching him and he hadn't done anything." So I say, "He was crumpling it up." And the entitled mum yelling says, "Who cares? It's just a piece of flooping paper. Order another." After this lovely display, my mum not so nicely asks the entitled mum to leave. However, before the entitled mum leaves, she tries to take the remaining shreds of my diploma as they're no longer of any use to me. My mum tells her to beat it or else and tells her that she'll be paying for my new diploma to be delivered. I'd love to say that she paid for it and that's the last I ever saw of her, but it's not. She didn't pay and refuses to even acknowledge that it happened to this day. So at the start of the video, I mentioned that you're going to get annoyed by some entitled parents. Well, there's 3 from 3. I guess this goes to show how horrible some people out there are, and unfortunately, good doesn't always prevail. At least with this one, the mum realised how horrible a person her friend was and all they had to do was pay for a new diploma. I'd honestly almost say that that's a win. Alright everyone, that is that for today's episode of Entitled Parents. I just want to start off by saying thank you so much for watching and I hope you enjoyed the video. Sorry that this wasn't a longer episode again, I just tried to find the best possible stories that I could, as well as some stories that were a little bit longer to make a good video. At the end of the day, I do now prefer quality over quantity when it comes to Entitled Parents and making sure we find real posts, but I will commit to doing a longer episode next time we do Entitled Parents. But that will pretty much wrap things up from me. I obviously want to take a moment to say thank you to all of our recent subscribers and thank you to everyone who's pushing us towards that 50k mark. This really is a dream come true and you're making that a possibility for me. Also, don't forget to join the Discord server. I know I mentioned mention this a lot, but it is a lot of fun and I suggest you guys join. We're getting a bit more active with over 250 members, so you'll have a good time. Otherwise, that is that for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you're all having a fantastic day, and I'll see you all tomorrow for another Reddit video. Bye.